Hello. So I had shot the part four based on a comment from a viewer who said that all my videos have a point, and I, I wasn't sure if I really had a point at the end of that third one. So I thought about it, and I came up with at least one thing. It's not really a point, but it's a comment that I just wanted to pass on from the hospice chaplain that I called up a few months after her passing. And he said something that I found um, insightful or even helpful. So one can go through different grieving processes. If I had to choose a theme across these three stories, I think the theme would be the process of grieving. And in the first two, there's a, well, let's suppose that let's just compare the second and third one. Uh, they both are about the process of grieving, and one of them was just coming to a recognition that it was a hollow, uh, there was a hollowness inside. And in the second one, it was one could call it a deepening or a shedding of an old skin to find something anew. And the question might be, how does one know which version of grieving that one might be in? And this comment by the hospice chaplain, who I spoke with one time after the funeral, he had given me his number, and I kind of ignored it for a couple of months. And I think about 2.5 months after her passing, it occurred to me, oh, wait, I have this number. I should probably talk to a professional of some kind at least once. And so I called him once. He told me something. And, uh, and I guess that's the only thing I've needed so far. As far as hearing something from a professional, and but I found it interesting. So again, but I'm posing it as a question: is how can we know which version of grieving we might be in? And here's his comment. He says to me, because I had told him, I actually had posed it like this. I had said, I've cried every single day, many times every day. Not a single day has gone by. Should I be concerned? And his response was, grieving is a very individual and personalized process. One can't say that crying every day is the wrong thing or the right thing. This might continue for another year or two for all we know, and one can't say if it's right or not for you. But there's one thing that you might keep an eye on, which is look at the emotions and the thoughts behind your tears. You should notice a shift or a change. On the other hand, if you notice that it's the same thoughts, the same emotions behind the tears, and you're kind of stuck in that, then there might be a cause for concern. When he said that, I quickly reflected upon what had I been tracking, and I noticed that, oh yeah, the feelings or the thoughts behind my tears had been changing. And at no point, so today is, well, today actually is day 111. Um, I'm shooting this a couple of days after I shot the original part four because I watched it and I didn't like it. And so anyway, but at no point have I felt stuck. Instead, it's been this constant this evolvement, this constant sort of unfurling of different emotions and different stories and different memories. And but when I look at the second story, that period of grieving, I would say almost throughout that entire 2 to 3 years, I felt stuck. And I believe I was stuck on the same story, stuck on the same emotions. And so that's what I could report from my own personal experience, that, yeah, that stuckness, I think, is an indication that I'm holding on to something that's not really something, that I'm holding on to something that's not something. Yeah. Whereas when it's the kind of grieving where it's a necessary process of painful emotions and painful thoughts, but there's a gradual sort of releasing so that one is moving forward and one is moving towards something truer, yeah, there isn't a feeling of stuckness. There's a feeling of movement. In fact, I would say for the first month or so, I wouldn't even call it forward movement or progress. It felt like I had no ground. It was like it's not the opposite of stuckness, but it was like everything was so nebulous that I didn't know where the ground was. I didn't know where up was, where down was, and I was just hanging in. And I didn't even know what I was hanging on to. I was just hanging in. Actually, let me try to remember what I was hanging on to. Yeah, I don't know. I, but so, so this is the second thing that I'll mention is I have a friend who, when I was struggling during that period, I just mentioned I couldn't find a ground. He, uh, he reminded me of something in the Dharma called the five remembrances. And conventionally, the five remembrances go something like, this body is made to grow ill. This body is made to grow old. This body is made to die and perish. So those are the first three. The fourth is, everything I cherish and love, I will lose. And the fifth is, the only thing I take with me is my karma, or my karma, my habits, my actions. But he had cited to me a version of the five remembrances as interpreted by Thich Nhat Hanh. And the first four were pretty similar, but the fifth, the phrasing struck me. And so karma can be translated as habit or even action. So this is how Thich Nhat Hanh translated the fifth remembrance. Instead of the only thing that I take with me, the only thing that I'm stuck with is my karma, he translated it as the only ground I stand upon are my actions, or my actions are the ground upon which I stand, or something like that. You could Google it if you want. And so let's just take the ground upon which I stand are my actions. And what was interesting was when I heard that, um, I realized in that moment that had I been a religious person, I suppose God would be the rock. But I wasn't really interested in that. And so I didn't have a ground. But when he reminded me my actions are the ground, it reminded me of the Buddha's own enlightenment, where he, I think, is tempted by Mara, and he, I think, puts his fist to the ground or something and says something similar that uh, the ground upon the, the ground are my actions. And he was citing all his past lives, all this life, but as well as all his past lives where he led a life of virtue. And I certainly have not led a life of virtue. But when my friend said that, I thought about the past 7 years during which I was doing my best to be her caregiver, and the past 20 years when I was her friend, and tried to be the best friend I could be, to try to show up for her as much as I could, even when I lived far away. And then, I don't know, when we were a couple, I don't really feel particularly proud of the ground that I had laid, so I didn't really think about that. But I just thought at least of the last 20 years and certainly the last 7 years. And I felt that like 80-90% of my actions offered me a ground that I felt this gives me a solid ground, like that I can be confident in or almost proud of. And that gave me the ground. And when I didn't feel like there was ground. And eventually I found my footing in sort of everyday reality after a month or month and a half. So, I mean, that's a little bit of a tangent. But I want to go off on another tangent. A couple, I've heard a couple of people say, uh, uh, I've come across it, I guess, in some readings, and I guess one or two people might have mentioned it. In fact, the chaplain, the what's his name, the hospice chaplain said it. He made a comment, and he wasn't the first one to say it. Something along the lines of, the depth of our grief is a measure of the depth of our love. And I remember the first time I heard that, I felt, I don't know if that's true or not. But by the time he had said it, I just thought, yeah, that doesn't work at all. It doesn't resonate to me at all. And I don't even see how it relates. Like, for example, let's suppose I really cared for somebody, but I don't really have much grief. Does that mean I didn't really love them? It just doesn't seem reasonable. Like some people have different people have different responses to loss. And so I told him, yeah, this doesn't resonate for me. And and what I told him is this, that I don't think that the depth of one's grief is a measure or an indicator of the depth of one's love. Instead, I would say the truth for me is that the depth of one's grief is a measure of the depth of one's attachment. That's how I see it. I mentioned in the past video, the background is that there's a Tibetan nun, a Western nun, but in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. I think her name is Tenzin Palmo, who was once asked, what's the difference between love and attachment? Because she had made a comment that they're close. Attachment or clinging is called the near enemy of love, in that it looks similar to love in a lot of cases, but in fact, they're not the same. And so that was her comment during the interview, and the interviewer then asked, well, how can we know the difference? How can we tell the difference? And her response was so simple and elegant. I've always remembered, it's always stuck with me. And it's been my operative definition for both words since I first came across it. And what she said was, love is, I want you to be happy. Attachment is, I want you to make me happy. And when I examine, when looking back on the past 100 and whatever days, the grief that I experience, I would say is 98, 99, potentially 100% attachment. It's that she's gone, and I'm grieving because there's a part of me that if she were to be here, it would make me feel better. That's what it is. Yeah. I'm not crying because, like, so for example, I'm not thinking like, oh my God, she has such bad karma that she's like descended to the hell realms and she's being burned alive or she's being tortured by these demons. Like, so I'm grieving for her. That's not the kind of that would be love, right? It's I want her to be happy. It's not that. It's more, well, I don't know if I can make it because she's gone, right? So it's attachment. It's I want her to make me happy. It's a selfishness ultimately, and 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 I call it a selfishness to be stark about it, and but I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I just think of it as that's just attachment, and I'm a human being, and I think just like most human beings, when I get if I get close to somebody and there's love, it usually gets entwined with my own self and the attachment and clinging. So there's a mixture of attachment and clinging that's mixed in any love relationship, regardless of whether it's romantic or friendly or family, whatever. And so I look at the grieving process as mostly a process of cleansing and purifying of this attachment and clinging. And as I cry, and I think I might have mentioned this already, that I've cried every day, multiple times, and just not just like tears, but like sobbing and weeping, and blowing my nose and like 50, 100 times a day kind of thing, to where it's all sore and I'm getting scabs down here. I mean, I don't have that now, but like so far, day 99 and yesterday, day 110, were the only 2 days that I didn't shed tears. And it's not that I'm keeping written track, but it's obvious the first time it didn't happen, I was like, wow. As I went to bed, I was like, wow, didn't even cry today. That was day 9, because I was very busy. But then the next day, just whatever. But yesterday, for some reason, didn't happen. So 2 days. But yeah, so there's all these tears. And the tears, I think, are a cleansing process, a purification. And the attachment, so as the attachment gets cleansed, this grasping, this clinging onto this her. Now, am I clinging to her like in this moment? No, I'm clinging to some past version of her. Yeah, a version of her that existed 4 months ago, 6 months ago, 6 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. That's what I'm clinging to. I'm clinging essentially to a memory or some apparition that no longer exists in this moment. But I'm clinging, and the tears are helping, as I see it, helping me to let go. of memories of her. Now, one might say, well, isn't that kind of sad? Like, if you completely cleanse yourself of this attachment, won't you just forget and there won't be memories and there won't? No, I'll still have memories, but like, so for example, I can access a memory of a time I went hiking by myself in Japan, but I'm not like tortured inside. I'm not crying inside. I'm not like emotionally disturbed inside when I think of the memory, right? And so one day I hope to just have a memory of her and not be disturbed and upset on the inside of, oh my God, I can't experience that anymore. Wow, that will never happen in this lifetime. I miss her, right? I mean, the clinging and so, but then still, like, a person might say, well, isn't that kind of sad that you don't even have that missing of her one day? And I don't know if that happens or not, but that's what I'm guessing or projecting. Yeah, could happen if I cleanse and purify and the clinging abates and there's no more attachment or clinging. But I kind of mentioned this in the last video or alluded to it, but what I find is that the less I cling, the more alive her spirit becomes to me in the moment. And that the vibrancy of her spirit or the presence of her spirit in the moment, I believe, is directly or inversely proportional to the degree of clinging I have to the human version of her that existed in the past. So the crying, the purification is actually to me a, a, a positive development. Yeah, because why cling to something that no longer exists when there's a possibility of cherishing and appreciating something that can occur in the moment? So, and to me, it's kind of dangerous from my perspective to think, not to think that the depth of one's grief is a measure of one's love, because then it means that, oh, when my grieving's over, maybe my love's over. Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous, but whereas the way that I'm seeing it is, no, the depth of my grief is an indicator of the depth of my attachment. So as my attachment lessens, the grief lessens, and the grief eventually, hopefully, one day is gone. And at that point, there is no attachment. So the mixture of love and attachment is kind of like the attachment has been burned away, and it just becomes love. And to me, that's how I see the spirit, is that her spirit is more accessible through love. Attachment doesn't serve the purpose of connecting, right? The Rumi quote isn't attachment is the bridge that connects us. It's love is the bridge that connects us. So when as the attachment gets burned away and it becomes more purely love, then the connection becomes more robust, stronger. And I can't say at this point that there's this robust connection, but I can at least observe across 100 plus days the degree of connection in being inversely proportional to the degree of grief and attachment that's still latent in my heart. And I still feel it. Like I might be laughing and my mind's kind of cheery and happy, but the heart's still heavy. My whole chest area in some ways is still heavy, and if I think about her in any meaningful way, I suddenly feel very constricted, like almost like this pressure on my chest, like my heart, and I don't imagine that's gonna go away anytime soon, but thank God that I have a mind, thank God I have a mind that can be engaged with life, be engaged with what's happening. I was just telling some people that I find that happiness is a mental phenomena that occurs through a mind that's engaged. And as long as my mind is engaged and isn't just kind of burying itself in the sand, I just sort of think of depression as impossible because the mind's engaged. I'm just speaking from within my own experience. It's not a commentary on anyone. I've experienced genuine depression, but when the mind's engaged, there's a kind of a happiness in the mind. And while the heart can be heavy and oppressed and and like, I might just die, I might get a heart attack next week or something, but at least the mind is fairly even and happy. The heart's not happy. The heart's broken. I like the word. I like the adjective broken for the heart. And the reason why I like the word broken, in fact, I've told a couple of people the heart is heavy and broken for me. And the reason why I like the word broken is because I experience the heart as the receiver of love. The heart receives love. And right now, it feels incapable of receiving love because it's broken. It's just broken. So all I can do is just stay open to life. And I imagine that I'm being loved. In a sense, I can sense this love coming, even from her, but I can't feel it in my heart because it's broken. But at the same time, I can sense it. Yeah. Anyway, I've gone way beyond what I originally intended to talk about. But going back, just to summarize, it was that I think of in grief, there's a sort of movement. The movement, I think, sense of movement and not being stuck, I believe, to be an indicator of the third kind of story. Whereas a stuckness, a constant stuckness, I think can indicate something closer to the second. That's just a conjecture. And then the second point, which didn't have much to do with the videos, is that, yeah, I don't think it's healthy to think that grief is a measure of love. In fact, I Googled this and I came across an article, and I kind of like what this lady said. She just bluntly said, grief, the depth of one's grief is a measure of the depth of one's grief. That made me laugh, but I just sort of prefer thinking of it as a measure of one's attachment and clinging. And ultimately, clinging is not love. My primary teacher, Dharma teacher, a guy named Khentrul Rinpoche, I asked this question of him a long time ago, in fact, point blank, of I seem to care for this person and it causes me some suffering. And his response was pretty blunt. He says, love doesn't cause suffering. Examine your level of attachment. And he was dead right. He was dead right. In the Dharma tradition, we say that before we even think of practicing love, we want to establish equanimity. And equanimity means an even mind or equalness. We don't pick one person above other people. That's a mind that's no longer equanimous. We think of all beings as similar or same, including ourselves. We don't put ourselves before others. We don't put our loved ones before our enemies and so on. Because otherwise, once we assert other people, then we start doing loving kindness. Then we planted the seed for attachment, and then that attachment leads to suffering. In fact, that's the basis of the Dharma, the Four Noble Truths. The cause of suffering is clinging and attachment. And so, I still persist at this. I still play favorites. I still choose people. Like my parents are precious to me. So their happiness means more to me than the happiness of some random human being that I've never met. So I will suffer for that, and I'm fine with that. But I'm aware that, okay, there will be suffering for that. Because when my mom dies, I'll suffer. But, probably not to this extent. Oh, wait, I shouldn't say that in case my mom hears this. But, well, that's just how it's going to be. All right, this was too long already.